The United States government affects all of our lives in numerous ways, but while the national level politics are exciting and capture international attention, the local government is just as influential as the national one, but is often overlooked in its impact on our daily lives. For example, many issues that would likely capture the attention of this town are overlooked due to the craze and sensationalism of the national media. Local issues are just as important to how government affects our lives, often in much more legitimate and significant ways than the national issues.
The sensationalist media bombardment which everyone in America experiences is, to some degree, not as relevant as the local government. The argument can be made that wall to wall Donald Trump coverage of empty podiums and phone calls does not have the same impact on American lives as do their local governments, especially considering that it is unlikely his plans ever even come to fruition. Crazed fear mongering over Ebola, with absurd examples such as this one, painting Ebola as the ISIS of biological agents, is lunacy. Ebola had little to no effect on American lives. These things have almost no impact on American lives, or at least not to the degree in which they are talked about or covered. Local government has a surprisingly large impact on our lives and receives little to no attention.
One way in which our local government affects us is through the Conservation Commission. This commission is important because it is devoted to the preservation and maintenance of both conservation land and other lands that are protected by the commission. The policies of the commission are more impactful than you would imagine, and the work that is performed is quite beneficial to the community as a whole. But what is the Conservation Commission? Well, it consists of 9 Weston residents who are elected to multiple year terms and are responsible for management and protection of the wetlands and conservation land which permeate Weston.
So, how does the Conservation Commission operate?
Where their legal basis operates on the Wetland Protection Act, and this law is what is relevant to up to 90% of conservation actions. The enforcement of the laws is conducted by the hiring of Michelle Grisenda, with whom I interned. One way in which the Conservation Commission has likely affected everyone in Weston is in regards to home construction. Anyone who has ever had construction or renovation done on their house has likely appeared in front of the Conservation Commission so as to ensure that no construction spilled into a buffer zone. In every town in Massachusetts, no construction is permitted within this buffer zone of a wetland. The Conservation Commission also participates in the ways in which it protects our environment. For example, this winter the icy roads are treated with a lot of road salt. This salt can have detrimental consequences on the environment if it is used to excess. The Conservation Commission is consulted on how to not use excessive amounts of road salt. This road salt can wash away in the rain and melting snow and contaminate wetlands and other protected lands. This is an important trade-off between driver safety and environmental protection, and if the Conservation Commission does a bad job, the environment can be damaged or the roads can be rendered unsafe. Thankfully this year there was not too much snowfall, so there was no concern of excessive road salting, and drivers still were very safe. But the most important thing they do is maintain conservation land. This land is in more places than you would think, and is one of the charming aspects of Weston which frequently can be underappreciated or overlooked. I happen to be lucky enough to live right next to the conservation land, the Sears land. Other prominent conservation lands include 2 properties on which Landsake has leased for their own purposes.
The main Landsake farm is located across the street from the field school in Weston, which is actually also conservation land which is leased from the Commission. The land is used for agricultural purposes, including growing plants, fruits, and also farming, and is a very charming aspect of Weston, made possible by the Conservation Commission. Landsake also has a lesser-known second property on the Sears land where they do most of their commercial farming, including their maple syrup production, and also have their main office located. Pictured here is their syrup production. But in addition to what the Sears land has to offer regarding Landsake, it also has a lot to offer for the people of Weston.
The Sears land certainly has been an enormous part of my childhood, and the Conservation Commission is responsible for a portion of that childhood as a result. This is because the Commission itself maintains the trails and land, including many of the charming bridges on the land. There are at least 8 sets of bridges on the Sears land alone, including a set of double bridges, a log bridge, and a charming stone bridge. But not all wooded land in Weston is conservation land. Contrary to what most would believe, the Weston landmark of Cat Rock is not actually conservation land, but recreation land, and while in practice the land is used for the same experience of the residents, the land is not protected in the same ways by the letter of the law. For example, every town in Massachusetts is required to create forms of affordable housing. These places exist on Livermore Circle and other areas, and sometimes land can get crowded for housing plots. Wooded plots like Sears Land and Cat Rock would usually be what is under threat, but conservation land is protected from housing expansions. This means that Cat Rock at this point in time is not protected from the prospect of housing encroachments, but the Sears land is. Currently, the Conservation Commission is acting to acquire these lands from the Recreation Department so as to better protect Cat Rock for future generations. Although Cat Rock is not conservation land, it is still maintained by the Conservation Commission, just as all protected land in Weston is. What this means is, in addition to the creation of bridges, is the periodical clearing of the trails. For example, this tree was blocking the path behind my house after it fell in a storm on the Sears land, which is protected by the Conservation Commission. I notified the Commission, and within a week it was cleared. This is the before, and these pictures are the after. So these are ways in which local government affects our lives. It's not always terribly exciting or fiery, but it's certainly just as important. The local government has arguably had more effect on my childhood than any president in history. The town has established my education, protected the land in which I created memories, and for all of Weston's flaws, there is something to appreciate in the beauty of the nature that surrounds us, and the effectiveness of a few passionate citizens who form our government to protect the virtues of our town.